On the night of February 24, 1978, 5 young men, friends from Yuba City, California, packed into a Mercury Montego and headed to a college basketball game. They never made it home. For days later, their car was found abandoned high in the Sierra Nevada mountains, 70 miles off course. No sign of struggle. No signs of the 5 men. And then the snow began to fall. By the time the spring thaw came, what they found in those woods would leave investigators speechless and the case forever unsolved. The 5 were known around town as the Boys. Not men, despite their ages ranging from 24 to 32. All of them had slight mental disabilities or learning difficulties. But they were well-liked, gentle, and tightly bonded by a shared love of sports, routines, and friendship. Jack Madruga, 30, the driver. Army veteran. Quiet, dependable. Bill Sterling, 29, religious and thoughtful. Jack Hewitt, 24, youngest, shy, but always smiling. Theodore Ted Weiher, 32, known for his sense of humor and sensitivity. Gary Mathias, 25, the outlier. Diagnosed with schizophrenia but under medication and doing well. He was charismatic, the leader type. They all lived at home with their families. On February 24th, they had one goal: go to Chico State University to watch a basketball game. The next day, they were supposed to play in a Special Olympics tournament themselves. Their uniforms were laid out. Ted even told his mother not to let him oversleep. But something went very wrong that night. The men left the game around 10 p.m. Witnesses confirmed they were in good spirits. They even stopped at a convenience store afterward to buy snacks, Hostess pies, chocolate milk, and sodas. And then they vanished. By the next morning, their families were frantic. None of them had stayed out late before. Calls were made, flyers printed, but no one had seen them. It was as if the road swallowed them whole. For days later, the Mercury Montego was found abandoned on a rutted, remote dirt road in the Plumas National Forest, near Oroville. It was 70 miles away from their planned route. What was chilling was this. The car wasn't stuck. The tank was 1/4 full. The keys were missing. Candy wrappers from their late-night snack run were inside. No signs of foul play. No footprints around the vehicle. Just snow. Deputies were baffled. Why would 5 men drive into the freezing wilderness with no winter gear, no supplies, in the middle of the night? More importantly, where were they? The media dubbed them the Yuba County Five. At first, investigators thought maybe Gary Mathias had a psychotic break and led the others astray. But his family insisted he was stable. And Gary had military survival training. He wouldn't wander into the woods unprepared. Then a new witness emerged, a man named Joseph Shans. Joseph Shans, 55, had driven that same mountain road the night the boys disappeared. His car had gotten stuck in the snow. While trying to free it, he had a heart attack. Stranded, in pain, and alone, he sat in his car until headlights appeared. Shans claimed he saw a group of people, including what looked like a woman with a baby walking near his car, flashlights bobbing in the dark. He called out for help. They didn't answer. Later, he said he saw more flashlight beams and even heard what sounded like whistling and talking. But no one came to him. Could it have been the 5? Or had someone else been out there with them? By morning, Shans survived and flagged help. That road, the very one where the Mercury Montego was found, was remote, icy, and led nowhere useful that time of year. So what were they doing there? Weeks passed. Helicopters scanned the area. Search parties went on foot with dogs. But the snow was deep, up to 6 feet in places. No tracks. No clues. It was as if the boys had vanished into thin air. Their families clung to hope. They believed the men might still be alive, holed up somewhere, maybe even afraid to come out. But deep down, everyone felt the creeping dread. Until June. When the snow melted, the forest began to give up its secrets. On June 4, 1978, a group of motorcyclists exploring a trail stumbled upon a U.S. Forest Service trailer about 20 miles from where the car had been abandoned. Inside the trailer, they found something horrifying. Ted Weiher's body. His corpse was on a mattress covered in sheets like someone had tried to care for him. But he was horribly emaciated. He had lost between 80 to 100 pounds. His beard showed he had survived for up to 13 weeks after disappearing. The trailer had food, clothes, and heating materials. But none of it was used. He had died slowly, freezing, starving, in a cabin that could have saved him. Nearby, searchers found more. Jack Madruga and Bill Sterling were found 2 days later, just 11 miles from the car. Their bodies were partially consumed by animals, but no trauma was evident. It looked like they had tried to hike out without the proper gear and froze to death. Shortly after, Jack Hewitt's backbone was found several miles from the trailer near a stream. It had been dragged by animals. His shoes were nearby. But one man was still missing, Gary Mathias. To this day, his body has never been found. The discovery only deepened the mystery. Why didn't they use the trailer's supplies? Who covered Ted with sheets? Why did they abandon a working car? What happened to Gary? And who was the woman with the baby seen by Joseph Shans? Their families were tormented. Jack Madruga's mother once said, "We know good and well someone made them do it. We can't visualize them going up there on their own. They wouldn't have fled off in the woods like a bunch of quail. We know somebody made them do it." 4 bodies were found. One was not. Of the 5 men who vanished into the Sierra Nevada in February 1978, only Gary Mathias remained missing. But Gary wasn't just another victim, he may have been the key to everything. And in the weeks after the bodies were found, people started asking a dangerous question. What if Gary Mathias didn't die in those woods, but escaped? Gary Mathias was different from the rest of the group. While the other 4 men were considered mentally disabled and lived under close supervision, Gary was sharper, more independent. But he also had a dark past. In his early 20s, Gary had served in the U.S. Army stationed in West Germany. That's where the trouble started. He was discharged after a violent psychotic break and diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. He returned home to Yuba City and spent time in a psychiatric facility where doctors described him as delusional and occasionally aggressive. But by 1978, he was stable. He was living with his parents, holding down a part-time job, and taking his medication regularly. His doctor said he had been doing great. That's what made it all the more confusing. Why would someone like Gary, who knew how to survive, who was on the right track, lead 4 friends into the wilderness to die? Unless he had a reason. When Ted Weiher's body was found in the Forest Service trailer, something was missing and something wasn't. Missing, Gary's shoes. Present, a different pair of shoes, Gary's military boots. That alone raised a question. If Gary left his boots behind, what did he leave in? The theory was this: Gary had taken Ted's shoes before leaving the trailer. Why? Because Ted's feet had swollen from frostbite and exposure, and he likely couldn't walk. Gary may have taken Ted's shoes simply because they fit better. But where did he go? Search teams spread out again. They followed creeks, checked ridge lines, combed through dense forest. But no trace of Gary Mathias was ever found, not even a bone, a shred of clothing, a fingerprint. It was like he had vanished into thin air. Gary's stepfather believed he had survived. In fact, he said Gary had likely gone underground, perhaps because of paranoia or a triggering event that sent him into hiding. He said Gary wouldn't hurt the others but might have panicked if something traumatic happened. Ted Weiher's brother wasn't so sure. He told the Los Angeles Times, "It doesn't make sense. None of this makes sense. Ted would have never gone up that road. Gary was the only one who knew that area." And that was true. Gary had family near that mountain range and had visited them several times. It's possible he knew the backroads and remote paths better than anyone in the group. Did Gary lead them there, or was he following something else? In the absence of answers, theories bloomed like mold. Red Square Theory 1. Gary went rogue. Some believed Gary experienced a psychotic break. Maybe he became paranoid, convinced someone was chasing them. Maybe he forced the others out of the car at gunpoint, though no gun was ever found. Maybe he led them to the trailer thinking they were safe. But if so, why didn't he try to save them? Blue Square Theory 2. The group was chased. Gary's mom recalled something chilling. A few weeks before the disappearance, Gary had come home shaken and nervous. He said, "Something weird is going on. I've got to lay low for a while." She didn't press him. Some believed Gary owed money or had gotten involved with a dangerous crowd, possibly connected to drug activity in nearby towns. Was someone following them that night? Did Gary see them and take the back road to escape? Yellow Square Theory 3. A stranger lured them. And then there was the woman and baby seen by Joseph Shans. That detail was never explained. No woman, no child was ever found. Was it hallucination? Or was someone else in the woods that night? A cult? A trap? Something more sinister? Investigators returned to the trailer where Ted had died. It was painful to examine because the trailer had everything they needed to survive. Enough army rations to last a year. A propane tank that could have heated the entire cabin. A locker full of clothes and blankets. None of it was touched except for a small amount of food. That meant someone was in the trailer but didn't use the supplies. The army rations had been opened with a P-38 can opener, a military-style tool. Only Gary had military experience. Was he the one who kept Ted alive for weeks? The autopsy said Ted died of exposure and starvation, but only after a long, agonizing decline. Someone fed him, someone tucked him in, and then that someone walked out of the trailer and disappeared forever. A few days after the car was found, a local resident claimed to have seen another vehicle parked on the same remote road around the same time. The man said it was a 4x4 truck with a camper shell. He remembered it because it seemed so out of place. Was it a coincidence? Or was that the vehicle Gary, and maybe the others were trying to avoid? That tip was never followed up properly. Some investigators believed it could have been related to illegal activity in the mountains, meth labs, poaching, or even a backwoods criminal element. What if the boys had seen something they weren't supposed to? Over the years, there were dozens of reported sightings of Gary Mathias. A man matching his description was seen at a truck stop in Nevada. Another man thought he saw him in Canada. In 1986, the FBI got an anonymous letter claiming Gary was alive, living under a new identity, afraid to come home. But no confirmed sighting was ever made. His social security number was never used. His fingerprints never popped up. No bank activity. No arrests. If Gary was alive, he vanished completely. Or he didn't survive the mountains after all, and his body just hasn't been found. One investigator said, "The Sierra will eventually give up its secrets. They always do." But decades passed. Searches dwindled. The forest grew back. And Gary Mathias became a ghost in the case. His absence loomed larger than any presence. He had become a symbol of what made this case unsolvable. Too many coincidences. Too many inconsistencies. Too many what-ifs. In 2005, on the anniversary of the disappearance, Ted Weiher's niece received an anonymous note in her mailbox. It read, "They didn't just walk into the snow. They were led there. No return address. No handwriting match. No DNA on the envelope. The note has never been traced." Imagine waking up in the middle of the night to distant voices echoing through the trees. Panicked, male, and unintelligible. Now imagine this. Those voices are coming from the same forest where 5 men vanished, where their car sits abandoned, and the snow is beginning to fall. This wasn't a ghost story. This was a 911 call. And it came in one day after the boys disappeared. February 25th, 1978. Early morning, less than 12 hours after the Yuba County Five were last seen. A woman in the Plumas National Forest area calls 911. She says she was woken up by male voices yelling in the woods. First, she thought it was a party or teenagers playing in the snow. But the tone wasn't joyful. It was frantic, desperate. She stepped out onto her porch and heard one sentence clearly. "Help me." The dispatcher wrote it off. The snowstorm had started. Sometimes echoes carried in strange ways. No units were dispatched. The report was filed and forgotten. Until March, when someone connected it to the missing men. Local law enforcement went back through radio logs. Over a span of 48 hours, February 25th to 26th, 6 other calls came in from people near the mountains reporting. Men shouting in the distance. Cries for help. Lights moving through the trees. One call even mentioned hearing a whistle. Repeated, sharp bursts like someone trying to signal. None of the reports were acted on. The area was too remote. Roads were iced. No one thought to connect them. But in hindsight, these could have been the last cries of the 5 men, or a warning that they weren't alone out there. The Plumas and Sierra County areas, especially in the 1970s, weren't just mountain escapes and hunting cabins. There were whispers of survivalist communities, drug runners, and off-the-grid families that didn't want strangers on their land. And then there was the story of the Watchers. Locals told tales of a group that lived deep in the forest, surviving off the land, scaring off hikers, and sometimes worse. Some said it was just a myth. Others said they had seen their shacks, even made contact, usually at gunpoint. Could the Yuba County Five have stumbled onto someone else's territory? In late June, after most of the snow had melted, a group of amateur hikers decided to explore the ridge line above the service trailer. About 200 yards from the site, one of them spotted a narrow trail leading into thick brush. Following it, they found something deeply unsettling. A cave, partly concealed by fallen trees and moss. Inside they found remnants of a small fire, a pile of bones, animal but freshly broken, a pair of glasses, not matching any of the 5 men, a piece of blue cloth, the same color as the jackets worn by the victims. The cave wasn't searched by officials. No formal report exists, but photos surfaced in a private investigation forum decades later. Was someone living in that cave watching them? There are rumors among the families and retired investigators that tape recordings were made during the air searches. One former pilot said that while scanning the forest, he picked up radio interference, like voices bleeding through military channels. He recorded what he could on reel-to-reel. The tape allegedly contains a man repeating, "They're watching, they're watching," the second voice, whispering, "Turn off the light," then a scream. The FBI never confirmed the tape's existence, but some believe it was buried, too strange, too inexplicable. If it was real, who was watching? A chilling discovery was made by a hunter in 1981, just 3 years after the case went cold. He was deep in the forest, about 5 miles west of the service trailer, when he came across a clearing. In the center, a tall wooden cross, partially burned, planted firmly into the earth. Nearby, animal bones arranged in a circle. He reported it to the Forest Service. A ranger went to investigate, only to find the clearing completely empty. The cross was gone. The hunter swore it had been there. Some believed it was a memorial, others a warning. But to this day, no one knows who placed it or why it was removed. In 1997, a man named Donnie Ray Hancock was arrested for illegal trapping and squatting in a cabin less than 10 miles from where the boy's car was found. When police searched his cabin, they found maps of the Plumas National Forest, dozens of newspaper clippings about the Yuba County Five, a journal with disturbing entries. They came too close. I watched them leave the car. Only one made it out. Donnie Ray was deemed mentally unfit to stand trial and was institutionalized. He never directly confessed to anything related to the case, but his journal raised a disturbing possibility. Someone may have been following them from the moment they left the car. We go back to the note Gary left weeks before the disappearance. Something weird is going on. I've got to lay low for a while. What did he mean? Some theorize Gary had crossed paths with something dangerous, either in town or during one of his visits to the foothills. Maybe he saw something he shouldn't have. Maybe someone had been watching him for longer than he realized. And when he and his friends drove home that night, they weren't just heading down a dark road, they were being hunted. In 2003, a forestry crew clearing brush near the original site reported hearing a woman's voice calling out, just after sundown. There were no hikers in the area, no campgrounds nearby, no access roads open at the time. They called out, but no one answered. Then they heard footsteps crunching snow, moving fast, but leaving no visible prints. It stopped, then silence. The team left early and filed a statement. Nothing came of it, but one of them later said, "It wasn't an echo. It wasn't wind. It was like someone, or something, wanted us to know we weren't alone." Cries in the forest, a trail of lights, a cave with bones. The night the Yuba County Five vanished, the forest wasn't empty. And the deeper you go into the woods, the more the trees start to whisper back. It started with a basketball game. 5 men, 1 car, a cold night, and the wrong turn into the mountains. But maybe the tragedy didn't begin on that snowy road at all. Maybe it started years earlier on the backroads of Yuba County. Because Gary Mathias didn't just vanish. He knew things. And when investigators started looking into his past, they found a trail of violence, secrets, and people who wanted him gone. Yuba City in the late 1970s was small, tight-knit, and working class. On the surface, it was safe, a place where everyone knew everyone. But underneath that, there was tension. Drug activity was quietly rising, especially methamphetamine production in the surrounding rural areas. Ex-military men had started building survivalist bunkers and stockpiling weapons. And then there were the off-the-grid families who handled their own business, and didn't trust outsiders. Gary Mathias didn't fit neatly into this world. He was too sharp for the sheltered group of boys he hung out with, but too unstable to run with the hardened crowd. And according to his cousin, he was asking questions before he disappeared. In 1993, a man named Benny Mathias, Gary's cousin, spoke anonymously to a journalist for a local crime magazine. What he said hadn't been published until recently, when the tapes resurfaced. Gary said he'd seen something he shouldn't have. He didn't say what, just that it was bad and high up. He kept telling me, if anything happens to me, it wasn't an accident. Benny said Gary believed he was being watched, possibly by people in town connected to the local police or worse, federal agents. It sounded like paranoia, but Benny wasn't the only one Gary confided in. 1 week before the disappearance, Gary was seen at a bar in Marysville. He didn't drink often, but that night he looked tense. He spoke to the bartender, a woman named Linda, who later told police. He said, "They're not going to let me go." I thought he meant the army, but then he added, "They've been out there longer than you think." I asked who. He just stared at me and said, "You'll see." When she asked what he meant by out there, Gary just tapped the wood counter and said, "Mountains. They never left." Linda tried to follow up, but he walked out. That was the last time she saw him. Ted Weiher's mother once said Gary had come to their house 2 nights before the game and sat in the kitchen for hours, not saying much. She remembered he asked strange questions. Do you believe people can disappear on purpose? Do you think something bad can follow you home? Would you go somewhere cold if it meant being safe? She didn't think much of it. Gary was different, after all. But after the disappearance, the conversation haunted her. Here's something few people know. On the night the boys vanished, a second person may have been in the car. A gas station attendant in Oroville told police he saw a blue Mercury Montego pull into the lot shortly after midnight on February 25th. The car matched the one driven by Jack Madruga. But what stood out was that it had 6 people in it. The attendant said, "There were 5 guys in the car, and someone in the back under a blanket. Looked like they were trying not to be seen." He didn't report it at the time. Only when he saw the missing persons flyer did he connect the dots. Police dismissed the sighting. But if it was true, who was the 6th person? When police searched Gary's room after the disappearance, they found something unusual. A spiral-bound notebook with pages torn out, except for 2. The remaining pages contained what looked like coded writing. Random letters, slashes, and numbers. Some patterns repeated, 22/L/W/9/B. To this day, no one has cracked the code. A local cryptographer suggested it might be a personal shorthand, a way for Gary to write things without being understood. What was so important he had to hide it, even from himself. The Mathias family had roots in the mountains going back generations. Gary's grandfather had owned land near the Plumas Forest, land that had been lost after a mysterious fire in the 1950s. Old-timers say there was bad blood between the Mathias family and another rural clan that still lived near that area. Some believe Gary may have been investigating something that happened to his grandfather, or had discovered that the land was being used for illegal activity. If he brought his friends there looking for answers, he may have led them right into a trap. Now here's something that has never sat right with investigators. The group never made it home from the basketball game, but no one ever confirmed they actually watched it. They were seen buying snacks after the game, but no ticket stubs were found. No verified witness places them inside the stadium. What if they never intended to go home? What if Gary told them they'd be taking a different route, to see something important? One family member of Jack Hewitt later admitted Jack was excited that night for a surprise. They all trusted Gary. If he said it was safe, they would have followed, right into the dark. In 2001, a retired forest ranger named Alan Dawes gave an interview for a local documentary that was never aired. In it, he said, "We were told not to talk about it. Orders came from Sacramento. The official line was, they got lost. But when we found that trailer, it didn't look like a bunch of lost boys. It looked like a message." He went further. "We saw signs. markers carved into trees, bones arranged in patterns, old mines that had been reopened. Someone had been using that area. Someone who didn't want company. Dawes died 2 months after the interview. The footage was leaked online in 2017, but quickly removed. A sixth passenger. Coded notebook. A family feud buried in mountain soil. The story of the Yuba County Five may not be about being lost. It may be about being hunted for something they didn't even understand. And if Gary Mathias was the key, then someone made sure to take the key and break it. Sometimes the scariest roads aren't haunted. They're chosen. The road the Yuba County Five were found on was not a road anyone would take by accident. It wasn't on the way home. It wasn't even in the right direction. It was narrow, steep, and impassable in winter. The kind of road you take if you're running from something, or chasing something only you can see. The Mercury Montego was found on Rogers Cow Camp Road, a remote service path leading deep into the Plumas National Forest. To get there from Chico, where the basketball game was held, the group would have had to 1. Drive south out of Chico. 2. Then, instead of taking the main highway home, veer east toward Oroville Dam. 3. Then follow a series of winding roads into increasingly isolated terrain. By the time they reached the mountain service road, they were 70 miles off course and climbing into snow at 4,400 feet elevation. This was not a wrong turn. This was a decision. Investigators studied Gary Mathias's belongings and discovered he had topographical maps of Plumas and Sierra County in his room. He knew the terrain. So why drive toward it in the middle of winter? Some believe Gary intended to go there that night. He may have had a reason, a meeting, a plan, or a destination no one else knew about. A handwritten note later found in his dresser read, "Rogers 4 miles in. Shelter possible." It wasn't clear when it was written, but it eerily aligns with where the group ended up. Here's what's strange, the Mercury Montego wasn't stuck. Deputies found it abandoned, but it could have easily been reversed back down the road. There were no signs of mechanical failure. The tires weren't spinning. It just sat there, quiet, waiting. Even weirder, there were no footprints around it. No dragging marks. No signs of panic. The doors were locked. The snacks from the store were still inside. It was as if they had simply stepped out of the car and disappeared into the snow. A former forest ranger named Rick Nolan came forward years later with a story. In 1976, 2 years before the disappearance, Rick was doing a routine patrol near the Cow Camp Road when he found a burned-out hunting cabin, long abandoned until recently. Inside, he found makeshift bedding, animal bones, rope and torn clothing, a rusty switchblade. He reported it. The cabin was scheduled for demolition, but paperwork disappeared. Nothing was done. The cabin stood about 5 miles uphill from where the Montego was abandoned. Gary may have known about it. Past the point where the Montego was found, Cow Camp Road narrowed into a dead-end trail. In winter, it became impassable. Yet, someone had driven partway up it. Fresh tire tracks were discovered, older than the search teams, but newer than the snowfall. The tracks didn't match the Montego's tires, meaning another vehicle had been up there, either before or after the group. Was someone waiting for them? Guiding them? Hunting them? A trucker named Dale Holstrom was driving north on Highway 70 late that same night, February 24th, when he passed a green pickup truck pulled off the side of the road. He told police that a man stood next to the truck, flashing his lights at passing cars, but Dale didn't stop. The man, he said, looked panicked and barely dressed for the weather. The location Dale described was near the turnoff toward Rogers Cow Camp Road. Police followed up too late. The truck was gone. No one ever claimed it. Dale was later shown photos of the missing men. He said the man waving at him looked just like Gary Mathias. A hiker named Erin Hale came forward in 1980 with a bizarre story. She had been snowshoeing in early March, days after the disappearance, when she saw something odd in a clearing near the old trail, a woman in a red coat, standing still, staring into the trees. Erin called out. The woman turned and walked away, vanishing into dense brush. When Erin reached the clearing, she found footprints, but no trail. Some thought it was a hallucination, but Erin insisted the woman was real. Police dismissed it. But years later, a tip surfaced that someone had seen a woman with a baby on the same road that night. Could the two sightings be connected? Search dogs were brought in weeks later, but by then most of the snow had melted and been disturbed. Still, the dogs followed a scent from the car uphill toward the trail system, then lost it. But not because of terrain. One of the handlers reported that the dog froze, whined, and refused to continue, something he said had never happened before. It was like the scent just stopped, or like the person had been lifted off the trail. Locals know that the mountains hold more than just trees and snow. Old miners' trails crisscross the Plumas forest, many of them unmarked on modern maps. One such trail, known only as Deer Hollow Cut, connects Cow Camp Road to an abandoned logging camp nearly 12 miles away. It's not a path a stranger would know, but someone who grew up in those hills or spent time with people who did might. Gary Mathias had visited cousins in the area as a child. Some think he was leading the group to that camp. But if that's true, the question becomes, why didn't they make it? The car wasn't stuck. The road wasn't random. The signs point to a plan, one Gary may have made. But plans don't vanish without a trace. And in the case of the Yuba County Five, the road home may have never been part of the map at all. When they found him, he was wrapped in blankets, tucked in like a patient. But alone, dead, and starved to death beside a stock pantry. Ted Weiher survived for up to 13 weeks in that trailer. Long enough to eat. Long enough to light a fire. Long enough to be found. But he didn't. He just waited. And the question that's haunted investigators ever since. Who was he waiting for? June 4th, 1978, 4 months after the boys disappeared. A group of motorcycle riders exploring a remote logging road stumbled upon a U.S. Forest Service trailer 19.4 miles from where the Mercury Montego had been found. The door was slightly ajar. The windows were broken. Inside was a scene that did not make sense. Lying on a bed, wrapped in 8 sheets, was the body of Theodore Ted Weiher. His feet were badly frostbitten. His body was emaciated, down by nearly 100 pounds. His beard was thick, suggesting he had survived up to 13 weeks. But around him were all the tools he needed to survive. The trailer was fully stocked. Canned food, enough to last a year. Matches and wood. A fully functional propane tank outside, capable of heating the entire cabin. None of it was used. Only a few cans had been opened. No attempt had been made to start a fire. The propane tank's valve was untouched. It was like Ted had entered the trailer, wrapped himself in blankets, and waited to die. But he didn't die quickly. There was no journal. No notes. Nothing in Ted's handwriting. But searchers found something in the wastebasket. Dozens of used Army ration cans opened with a military-style can opener, AP-38, the kind used in the service. Only one man in the group had military training, Gary Mathias. The implication, Gary had been in the trailer too. Maybe feeding Ted. Maybe helping him. But if so, where did he go? Ted's body had been carefully tucked in, the sheets folded almost hospital style. Even his head was partially covered. Authorities and the family agreed Ted didn't do that himself. Someone had cared for him, maybe even until the moment he died. Which raised the most painful question for Ted's family. Why would someone leave him behind? Gary's shoes were found in the trailer. Ted's were missing. One theory, Gary swapped shoes with Ted, whose feet were too swollen to wear his own anymore. If that's true, it means Gary left on foot, in the cold, alone or not, and never returned. But why? Did he go to get help? Did he give up? Was he forced out? The forest never answered. The Forest Service trailer had been used before. A few old rangers said that during patrol seasons, it had a creaky floor and a metal roof that echoed every movement. Ted would have heard every sound outside. Every footstep. Every animal. Every knock of wind against the door. For 13 weeks. Some wonder if he was afraid to leave because of what he heard. Or who he saw. Ted's body wasn't badly decomposed. The freezing cold had preserved it. But parts of it showed signs of exposure trauma, open sores, gangrene on the feet, and late-stage starvation. He died in total agony. Pathologists said he likely survived until late April or early May, nearly 60 to 70 days after the others had perished. How did he last that long? And what kind of mental state was he in? Was he waiting for Gary to come back? Or waiting for something else entirely? The trailer wasn't damaged. Nothing was broken. No signs of a fight. But strangely, none of the windows had been covered despite deep snow and freezing wind outside. And none of the drawers or closets were opened. Clothes and sleeping bags were untouched. Almost like Ted was afraid to explore, afraid to move. Afraid that if he made noise, someone might come. Forensic investigators found one strange clue, a frost line on the inside of the trailer, a foot above the floor, where ice had built up and melted. It suggested that the door had been left open for long periods, possibly open from the outside or propped. Animals might have done it. Or a person. Could Gary have left the door open to signal for help? Or was someone else checking in on the trailer from time to time? This detail is often forgotten, but it's chilling. Ted was wearing no shoes, only socks. Thick, layered, carefully pulled up. But here's the part that hit investigators. They weren't his socks. They were labeled with initials that didn't match any of the 5 men. Where did they come from? And more importantly, who else had been in that trailer? Pathologists estimated that Ted died sometime in late April. But something didn't add up. One of the opened food cans had a use-by date of May 1980. The can's lid had rust on the edges, but the cut was clean and fresh, indicating it had been opened after April. So either Ted lived longer than assumed, or someone else came into the trailer after he died and helped themselves to food, and then walked away. Beside the propane tank was a box of matches, sealed and dry. They had never been opened. Anyone who's camped in the woods knows your first instinct is heat, fire, light, but Ted made no attempt to light anything. Not even a single match. Was he too weak? Or was someone else in charge and didn't allow it? In 1978, locals spoke in hushed tones about a mountain man, a hermit said to live deep in the forest, surviving off animals, stealing supplies, and watching camps from a distance. No official evidence ever proved his existence, but dozens of campers reported missing gear, shadows around their fires, whispers in the trees at night. Some believe the Yuba Five met this person. Others think the mountain man was a story to hide something worse. Something organized. Something human. Something that knew those trailers were there and waited for strangers to find them. Ted Weiher lived. Long after the others died, he waited, wrapped in blankets, surrounded by warmth he never used. Someone had been there. Someone had helped him. And someone had left. But the question still haunts that trailer like frost on the walls. Did Ted die waiting for help, or die waiting to be taken again? From the abandoned car to the cabin where Ted Weiher died, it was 19.4 miles. Through waist-deep snow in the dark, wearing tennis shoes and thin jackets. 4 of the 5 never made it. 1 did. And what lies between those 2 points, the woods, the cliffs, the missing footprints, is where the truth hides. This is the mile that broke the case. The mile that doesn't make sense. When search and rescue teams looked at the path from where the Mercury Montego was found to the Forest Service trailer, one question immediately emerged. How did anyone survive that hike? To get there, they would have had to climb steep elevation gains, cross freezing creeks, navigate deep snow 6 to 8 feet in places, do it at night, with no flashlights, no maps, no winter clothing. And yet someone made it. Someone led the group at least part way. And someone chose not to stop at any point between the car and the trailer. Why? 3 other men were found between the car and the trailer. Jack Madruga and Bill Sterling, found 11.4 miles from the car, near the road. Their bodies had been partially eaten by animals. It looked like they collapsed together and froze. Jack Hewitt, found further along, near a stream. Just bones scattered by wildlife. They were headed toward the trailer but never made it. No shelter. No sign they turned around. So why did they keep walking into deeper snow? Unless they thought someone was already waiting ahead. The car wasn't stuck. It was warm inside. The route back was safer. So why leave it? Here are the leading theories. 1. They were chased. Fearing someone behind them, they ran forward. 2. They were following someone, a person they trusted. 3. They thought they saw lights. Several witnesses claimed strange lights were seen in the forest that night. If someone ahead promised warmth or safety and Gary said it was okay, they would have followed. Even into death. Just past the halfway point between the car and the trailer, there's a creek swollen by snowmelt. In February and March, it's a freezing, thigh-high torrent. There was no bridge. Yet someone crossed it. Investigators found faint signs on the far side, a disturbed bank, broken branches. Dogs followed a scent to that point and then lost it again. How did they cross? Did someone help them? Or was there a structure, a log, a rope, or even a temporary bridge that was removed afterward? If so, who put it there? A resident near La Porte Road, which winds along the mountain's edge, reported something strange on the night of February 24th. It was like someone was calling out but not words. Like they were hurt. And then it stopped. The location of the report was directly along the path between the car and the trailer. But that area was never searched. It was too steep, too thick. Some believe someone may have gone off the main trail either to hide or to avoid something on the path ahead. Maybe that's where Gary Mathias went. And maybe he never came back. One of the eeriest discoveries came in late April when snow began to thaw near the area where Jack Hewitt's bones were found. Searchers saw something odd in a clearing, a pattern of repeated footprints. Not in a line, like someone walking, but in circles. Tight, over and over, worn deep into the snow. It looked like someone had been pacing, perhaps for hours. Or even days. The tracks eventually faded toward the tree line. The pacing prints were never officially documented. But a local deputy who took a photo said, "It looked like someone was waiting. Or losing their mind." A volunteer searcher claimed that while combing the woods just beyond that clearing, he saw something watching him. He described it as tall, covered in what looked like animal hide, holding a stick or staff. At first, he thought it was a fellow hiker. But when he called out, the figure stepped backward without making a sound and vanished into brush. The man quit the search team the next day. He told his wife, "They're not lost. They were taken." Here's what many forget. Gary Mathias was trained for terrain like this. In the army, he had spent time in mountain survival courses learning to build shelter from snow, navigate in low visibility, hunt small animals. His family believed if anyone could have made it to the trailer, it was Gary. Which raises the question, did he get there first? If so, why didn't he go back for the others? Unless he wasn't allowed to. Years later, in 1995, a hiker named Carl Bressler recorded audio while camping near the same trail. In the middle of the night, his tape picked up something bone-chilling. A low, distant scream, then silence, then something mimicking the scream again. He thought it was an animal, until he played it for a park ranger who said, "That's not an echo. That's something repeating you." No animals matched the pattern. The scream was human. The location, within 1 mile of where Ted was found. Several amateur sleuths have spent years trying to walk the same path between the car and the trailer. Even in modern gear, in decent weather, it's brutal. What they noticed? No shortcut makes sense. No alternate shelters existed. The only logical stop was the trailer. And that's what makes the missing mile so strange. If Gary made it that far, if he fed Ted, if he left to find help, why wasn't his body ever found along that path? Where did he go? Some say there's a hidden exit, a service route, or tunnel used during old logging operations. If Gary found it, he could have vanished into the mountain. Or into someone's hands. In 2002, a forestry crew laying cable near the old trail uncovered a strange arrangement of rocks, almost like symbols pressed into the earth. It wasn't clear what they meant, but one set looked like arrows pointing toward the direction of the trailer. Next to it, buried in the soil, was something else. An old metal dog tag. Military issue. The name was nearly scratched off, but one part was still legible. Math. That's all. Was it Gary's? The dog tag was turned over to local authorities and then never seen again. 19 miles. 5 men. 1 trailer. 4 bodies. The space between the car and the trailer should have held answers. Instead, it's held only silence. And maybe that silence was never empty. Maybe it's still watching, waiting, listening. After the bodies were found, investigators searched the homes of the Yuba County Five one last time. They weren't looking for evidence anymore. They were looking for understanding. What they found were letters, written and unsent, hidden in drawers, left behind like time bombs waiting to be opened. Some were confessions, some were warnings, and some may have been goodbyes. Jack was the most normal of the group, a U.S. Army veteran with a driver's license, a strong sense of order, and a strict family routine. In his closet, tucked between his service documents, was a torn piece of notepad paper. Scrawled in blocky, anxious writing were 4 words. "Don't trust the quiet ones." That was it. It wasn't in Jack's handwriting, and his family didn't recognize it. It didn't match anything in the house. It wasn't clear when it was written or who it was meant for. But the quiet ones became a phrase investigators couldn't shake. Some thought it referred to Gary, the most mysterious of the group. Others thought it pointed beyond the group to whoever they met that night. Ted Weiher was funny, compassionate, and deeply sensitive. He had a childlike innocence, but he kept notebooks filled with jokes, doodles, and thoughts. In one of his notebooks, found by his mother after his death, a page was dog-eared and titled, "If I ever get lost." Underneath were steps. Stay calm. Don't leave your group. Trust someone smart. Don't trust the dark. The last line? If something in the woods wants to help you, ask why. That was written months before he vanished. It read like a joke. Until it didn't. Bill was the most spiritual of the 5. He attended church weekly, even helping clean the pews after Sunday service. A letter was found in his Bible, sealed, never mailed. Addressed to his pastor, it read, "I had a dream that a man with no face showed me a path in the woods. He kept saying only one can go home. I don't know what it means, but it stayed with me for weeks. He dated it just 10 days before the disappearance. Was it just a dream? Or something more? Some believe Bill had been having premonitions. Others think he might have overheard something Gary had been talking about. Jack Hewitt was quiet, sweet, and loved his family deeply. He often recorded messages on a small tape recorder his sister had given him. In a box of old cassettes, his mother found a final, unheard tape labeled in pencil. Just in case. The tape contains Jack's voice, nervous and shaky. "Hi, Mom. If I'm not home, don't worry. I'm probably with the guys. If you're hearing this. I don't know. I hope it wasn't Gary's idea." Silence. Then, he says there's something up there he wants to see. Something real. A long pause. He says not everyone will understand. The tape ends there. The audio was never released to the public. Gary's room was neat. Too neat. Like it had been recently cleaned, but not by him. In the bottom drawer of his dresser was a torn journal, many pages missing. The pages that remained were chilling. "I know the way in. I know they'll follow me. The line between what's real and what's in my head is blurring again. But I have to see it. I have to prove it's there. Otherwise, what's the point?" His doctor said Gary hadn't had a schizophrenic episode in over 2 years. But if these were recent entries, something had changed. In Ted Weiher's old school backpack, long stored in the attic, was a letter with no name, no date. Just, "To whoever finds this, we didn't mean to. It wasn't supposed to happen. He said it would be okay. But now it's cold and I think we've made a mistake. If I don't come back, tell Mom I'm sorry. And tell her Gary wasn't crazy. He was just too sure." It's never been authenticated. Some say it's a hoax planted later. Others, especially Ted's mother, swore it was his handwriting. If true, this letter means Ted knew something had gone wrong, and he was prepared not to come back. Years later, during renovations in Jack Madruga's home, a sealed envelope was found under a loose floorboard. Inside was a Polaroid photo, 5 boys standing beside the Mercury Montego parked in the woods. The timestamp was smudged, but the trees had no snow. On the back of the photo, in pen, "We made it." But the strangest part? There was a 6th figure, partially visible in the photo, off to the side, blurry, wearing a heavy coat, watching. The photo was turned over to police, then lost in storage. But Jack's niece, who took a scan of it, said there was someone with them. "I think they followed that person into the dark." In 1979, over a year after the case went cold, Bill Sterling's pastor received a letter in the mail with no return address. Inside was a short note. "You could have stopped him, but you said it wasn't your place. It was never about God. It was about him." To this day, no one knows who sent it. The handwriting was never matched. The pastor never spoke about it again. He moved out of town 3 months later. Some believed it was from a family member. Others believed it was a confession. Inside the trailer where Ted died, investigators found a torn page from a Bible stuffed between 2 cans in a cabinet. It was Job 23, verses 8 to 9. "Behold, I go forward, but he is not there, and backward, but I cannot perceive him. On the left hand where he doth work, but I cannot behold him. He hideth himself on the right hand, that I cannot see him." It had been underlined in pencil. Below it, someone had written, "Still watching. Still listening." No fingerprints were found on it. These boys were not directionless. They had thoughts, fears, warnings, and in the words they never spoke aloud. There is a common thread. Gary knew, Ted doubted, and the rest followed, into a forest that did not welcome them, and a silence that may not have been silent at all. In 1985, 7 years after the Yuba County Five vanished into the mountains, a man walked into a diner in Loma Rica, California. He was gaunt, wild-eyed, with overgrown hair and mismatched clothes. He looked like someone who'd lived in the woods for years. He ordered black coffee, then whispered something to the waitress that made her knees go weak. "I knew them. I saw what happened." Then he said a name no one had spoken aloud in years. "Gary's still out there." The next day, the man vanished. The man's name, according to the receipt, was J. Hemphill. No ID, no license plate. He paid cash. The waitress, Connie Wells, remembered every word. He sat in the corner, trembling, and kept asking if they still talk about the 5 boys. At first, she thought he was just rambling, until he said, "I saw the car before they found it. I saw Gary walking away from it." That detail hadn't been widely publicized. He leaned in and said, dead serious, "He's not dead, but he's not coming home either." Connie thought it was a prank, until she noticed the burn scars on his hands and a tattoo on his wrist. 1978. Police ran the name. Nothing came back. No missing person report, no criminal record, no tax filings under that name. But a deputy remembered someone by that last name from back in the day. James Hemphill, a drifter who used to hang around Oroville in the 70s. Known for breaking into hunting cabins, living off-grid, disappearing for months at a time. He had a reputation for knowing the woods too well. He was once questioned in a separate missing person case in 1975, and then dropped off the map. Until now. That same night, Connie found a napkin under the coffee mug he'd left. Written in shaky ink. They went up the wrong road, but they weren't lost. They were shown the way. It wasn't the cold that killed them. There was someone else. One of them opened the door. The rest paid for it. No name, no explanation. Just a single signature at the bottom, J.H. Local police brought in a sketch artist. Connie described him in detail. When the sketch was released to the family members of the victims, Gary Mathias' stepfather went white. He said, "That's him, or it could be him. My God, is that Gary?" The facial features were close, especially the eyes and jawline. But it had been 7 years, and time changes everything. Experts were called in to compare the sketch with old photos of Gary. The result? Inconclusive. It could be Gary, but it could also be someone who looks a lot like him. The man wore a military-style jacket, but the tag had been cut out. He had boots that matched the same kind Gary Mathias had worn before combat issue Vietnam era. But again, no serial number or identifier. What stood out most? A chain around his neck with a small piece of metal, like a dog tag, but filed down to an unrecognizable shape. When asked where he got it, he allegedly told another diner patron, "It used to be my name." The local church pastor, Reverend Colin Myers, later told police that J.H. came to him during confession. What he said was chilling. "There was a fire, and something in the fire. We thought it would help. We were wrong." Reverend Myers didn't know what to make of it. He thought it was metaphorical, until the news broke that the man might have been connected to the Yuba County Five. He turned over his notes to police. They were stolen from his office 2 days later. After the diner incident, Hemphill was seen one more time, walking along the road near Sly Creek Reservoir, talking to himself. A hiker named Patricia Gomez swears she saw him sitting under a tree, whispering into a radio that wasn't there. When she got close, he looked up and said, "Too late now. They're all underground." She turned away to get help. When she looked back, he was gone. No one ever saw him again. The day after the incident was reported, a black SUV arrived at the Loma Rica diner. Agents claiming to be with the FBI interviewed Connie, took the napkin, and left no contact info. When Connie asked for a business card, one of the men said, "He's not who you think he is, and if you see him again, don't engage." Locals say the FBI was never officially involved in the Yuba 5 case, but they've shown up every time someone claims to see Gary Mathias. A forensic expert later analyzed photos of J.H. and pointed out something strange. The burns on his hands looked like chemical exposure, not fire. He suggested they came from contact with industrial waste or unfiltered fuel. One theory, Gary or whoever this man was, escaped something underground. Some believe the mountain was home to an illegal military installation or an off-the-book scientific outpost, possibly hidden beneath the forest. The burn marks, the PTSD, the refusal to use a name. Could he have been an experiment gone wrong? In 1988, a recorded 911 call came from a payphone in Nevada. The man on the tape said, "He wasn't crazy. He just knew too much. They followed us. He's still alive, but only just. Stop looking. You don't want to find the rest." The call was traced to a casino parking lot. By the time officers arrived, the booth was empty. Audio experts believe the voice matched Hemphill's from the diner, which leaves only one question: the truck stop witness, the blurry photo, the strange confessions. One constant thread emerges. There may have been a sixth person in that car all along. Someone they picked up after the game. Someone who told them about a shortcut. Someone Gary knew and trusted. The man at the diner claimed, It was supposed to be a test. 5 went in. Only 1 came back. He just forgot how to be a person. A man appears 7 years later, whispering secrets about the dead. He looks like the one who vanished. He knows things no one else could. And then he disappears again. So the question is, did Gary Mathias come back as someone else? Or did someone wear his face to bury the truth deeper? The Yuba County Five are long gone. Their bones rest in quiet places. Their names are printed on cold files and forgotten news clippings. But the forest hasn't forgotten. Because if you walk the road where the Mercury Montego was found, if you follow the trail to the service trailer, sometimes you still hear them. Sometimes the wind sounds like 5 voices calling out. And one of them says, "This wasn't supposed to happen." Officially, the case is closed, but not solved. No one was charged. No further remains were found. Gary Mathias is still listed as a missing person. The official theory remains. The 5 men got lost, panicked, and succumbed to the elements. But if you followed this story, you know that explanation falls apart the second you look too closely. So in this final chapter, we return to the mountain, to retrace the steps, and ask the last question that matters. What really happened in those woods? February 24th, 1978. The 5 men attend the Chico State basketball game. Around 10 p.m., they stop at a convenience store, buy snacks. Instead of heading home, they drive into the mountains. February 25th, early hours. The Mercury Montego is driven 70 miles off-route up Rogers Cow Camp Road. The car is found abandoned days later, no signs of struggle, no damage. March-June 1978. After snow melts, bodies of Jack Madruga, Bill Sterling, and Jack Hewitt are found. Ted Weiher is discovered in a trailer 19.4 miles from the car. Gary Mathias vanishes. But in between these facts are gaps. A woman and baby seen in the woods. A second set of tire tracks. Whispered voices on radio frequencies. And the man in 1985 who claimed to be one of them. Multiple witness reports, including the gas station attendant and truck driver, describe a 6th person in or near the car that night. Even the Polaroid photo, the blurry figure in the trees. Theories suggest a hitchhiker they picked up, someone Gary knew and trusted, a person who led them into the mountains. The most disturbing theory? The 6th man wasn't just someone they picked up. He was someone who waited for them. Someone Gary may have been communicating with for weeks. Here's what several independent investigators, journalists, retired officers, and online sleuths now believe might have happened. 1. Gary was lured or convinced to go to the Plumas forest. He may have believed there was a safe house, a meeting point, or something hidden there. 2. He told the others it was a shortcut or an adventure. 3. Once on Rogers Cow Camp Road, they encountered someone, possibly the 6th man. 4. At some point, the car was abandoned, either by choice or force. 5. The group split. Some followed Gary or the stranger toward the trailer. Others tried to escape but froze on the way. 6. Gary and at least 1 other made it to the trailer. 7. Ted was cared for until he was left behind. 8. Gary either died somewhere his body was never found, was taken, or became someone else entirely. This theory doesn't solve everything, but it explains more than the official story. A few locals whisper that the Plumas area once hosted classified government activity related to weather monitoring or something darker. Several trailers in the area, including the one Ted died in, were never properly cataloged. No one knows who had access. Some were stocked for years but never claimed. If Gary had stumbled onto something he wasn't supposed to find, it would explain why supplies were never used, why authorities sealed parts of the report, why FBI agents appeared in 1985 but never left records. Some believe the Yuba County Five were collateral damage, caught in something too big to understand. None of the families believe their sons simply got lost. Ted's mother said they were either told to go up there or made to. Gary's stepfather once said, if Gary's still alive, he knows he can't come home. And maybe he can't, because maybe home doesn't exist anymore for someone who walked out of those woods. Of course, some theories go even further. UFO sightings were reported that same night. Strange lights in the sky near Oroville Dam. Theories of infrasound, a low-frequency hum that causes confusion and panic. Others say it was mass hysteria, or a shared delusion, or a group panic event triggered by Gary's schizophrenia. But that doesn't explain the quiet tucking in of Ted's body, the unused supplies, the letter that said, he said not everyone will understand. Some believe Gary saw something real. Others believe he believed something was real and that was enough. In 2024, a new investigative team hiked the route from the car to the trailer, retracing every known step. It took them 3 days. What they found? A rusted flashlight lodged in a tree trunk, a scrap of red fabric tangled in a high branch, and a tree stump carved with the initials. GM 79. 1 year after the case was closed. No one knows if it's real, or staged, or planted, but the forest keeps whispering. No new evidence has emerged since 1985, but stories still come in. Campers who hear pacing outside their tents, lights on the ridgeline with no source, voices calling names that don't belong to anyone living, and on the wind sometimes. He's still out there. Jack, Bill, Ted, Jack, Gary, 5 friends. One winter night, a mystery so tangled it became legend. Were they lost? Led? Or taken? Maybe the answers are still in the trees. Or maybe the answers were buried the moment Gary walked out of that trailer and disappeared forever.